Alright, we're back. And I figured the text thing out on the last one. Hopefully it does the thumbnail. Fingers crossed. Regardless, we're talking about Kenneth Grant. We talked a little bit about the Shadow. Now, what else does Grant talk about? Because there's a lot he covers in Cult of Shadow. In fact, he breaks down a whole bunch of different things. Most of it's not bearing mentioning on the ideas that are put forth. They're just an alleged history. We'll get into it. But Grant also sits here and goes back and piggybacks off our favorite term here, Vamachara, Vamamarga, or the left-hand path of the goddess. Again, piggybacking off that and saying Avalon and everyone can just get stuffed. Because what he says is that it's a formula of essentially reversion and retroversion that is going to center the Suvasini, which is what he says is the embodiment of the fire snake. And it's centering that within the formula as a focal point. What happens after that is that he emphasizes a bunch of elixirs, the Bhairava quality of fearlessness, and the Kala logic to kind of make this idea of like the fluids, the emissions, the drugs, the becoming your own, all mixes together, and this is what the left-hand path is. This is what Vamamarga is. Then he starts adding to it, because he loved to embellish. He starts talking about magnetizing the Suvasini, the fire snake, in trance. Linking this to... then linking... This is a lot to follow. Then he talks about the Kala fluids and the secretions, and he links it to the tattvas for some reason. He does warn that if polarity is wrong in this magnetizing, that there can be venomous states, which, considering where we're at, I would shudder to think of what he would consider a venomous state. But by doing all of this, you end up heading towards what he said the aim of Kaula is that it's Kisanika Mukti, or instant liberation by a single perfect ascent of the fire snake. Now, it's a whole other ball game, but perfect single ascent of a fire snake through the body, where this is part of the foundation of the understanding of a couple other things that are outside the purview of this lecture. He then goes on to talk about tarot, because he has mapped tarot onto these body zones, onto these power zones on the body, and he tries to say that tarot comes from Egypt, that it originates in Egypt. Now, I know of, like, including Grant, 3 different claims about Egypt being the source of tarot. That's an entire strange thing, because all 3 of them have different explanations for it. Grant's specifically tries to talk of a goddess Ta'urt, and saying that Ta'urt becomes tarot. And that this happened, the priests took vast, like, astronomical timescales and would use Ta'urt to map these things. We know this doesn't happen. We're aware of this. He then goes on to attempt to take Spare's atavistic method Western Kabbalah, writings of Crowley, and mix these with some African diasporic stuff. He attempts to say that Spare's sigilization is the same thing going on as the Vives and voodoo. And then he goes to talk about mapping the Yoruba Ifa divination, the 8x8 grid, mapping this onto the Tree of Life, ignoring the fact that the Ifa grid, it's like a 2,500, like it's a 2,500 thing. It's a big thing. It's not this neat grid that he tries to put it in. But he tries to combine all of this together to make a cosmogram. He further, in another chapter, tries to track some of the work of Frater Akkad. Talks about Frater Akkad's 3193 keys, with Ma'ayon, the Aeon of Ma'at. These are separate side tangents I may get into at some point. But these were announced in 1948, 2nd of April. He starts to talk about Frater Akkad's tree reversal experiments, which is something that gets heavily leaned on in Qliphothic stuff. It's, again, a side tangent with this. And then Grant attempts to treat Ma'at as a Typhonian Ma current, as like this phase shift where it was this Typhonian Draconian thing, this Typhonian Sirius thing, that Akkad's Ma'ayon ends up being a shift in the currents. He then circles back to Kabbalah and Voodoo in a weird. He maps the Tree of Life with Ida, combines the symbols of the Voodoo Vive, and as we said, the 8x8 is 64 Ifa schema, and what he ends up saying is that by doing this and taking some folk accounts, if you inscribe Vives onto mirrors or reflective surfaces, that you could knock on the door of opening up different spirits to awaken atavisms, and that these atavisms would then tie into Spare's atavistic state, and these atavistic states can be mapped on the 64 grid, and the 64 grid aligns with the Tree of Life. We got the whole kitchen sink is in here. After he's done with that, he moves on to talking about Michael Berteau and the OA, the Monastery of the Seven Rays, where he tries to say that Choronzon is not the entity of the abyss, but is a gate. We'll get into this, I promise. Maybe a little bit. He is an intermediary gate between universe A and B, and that it develops, and doing this develops Mystère Lycanthropique, or Astrolacanthropy, Voltaire's path leaping on the Qliphothic back of the tree. That is a crazy statement for me to end this video on. We're going to have to get to a part 3 of Grant.